In 1990, 5 college students were brutally murdered in Gainesville, Florida by a drifter named Danny Rolling. His crimes later inspired the iconic horror movie Scream. This is the true story behind the Gainesville Ripper, one of America's most disturbing serial killers.
911, what's your emergency?
Settled in north central Florida lies Gainesville, a college town filled with tree-lined streets, bike trails, and the rhythmic hum of student life. But in August of 1990, Gainesville was consumed by terror so brutal, so senseless, that it would etch itself permanently into the psyche of the nation. It was supposed to be the start of something exciting. The University of Florida was welcoming new students, and Gainesville was alive with the optimism of a new semester. Students filled dorms and apartments, unpacking boxes and dreams. But by the end of the first week in August of 1990, 5 students, bright, young, full of potential, would be brutally murdered, and Gainesville would never be the same. On August 24th, 17-year-old freshman Christina Powell and her roommate Sonia Larson hadn't even finished setting up their apartment. They were full of nerves and anticipation for college life. What happened that night was beyond comprehensive. An intruder had slipped into their apartment, waited until they were asleep, and then unleashed a violence so graphic it shocked even seasoned detectives. Sonia was attacked first, bound, raped, and stabbed. Christina was killed next, her body positioned grotesquely, posed by the killer like a macabre display. The walls of the apartment bore no signs of forced entry. He picked the lock. Police feared a sexual predator. They were wrong. This was far worse. Just one day later, the body of 18-year-old Christina Hoyt was found in her small apartment. She hadn't shown up for her night shift at the sheriff's office where she worked as a clerk. Deputies sent to check on her made a discovery so disturbing that many of them had to seek counseling afterward. Christina had been murdered, decapitated, and posed. Her severed head was placed on a shelf, facing her lifeless body, arms draped across the seat of a chair like she was watching herself. Whoever was doing this wasn't just killing. He was putting on a show. And the worst part, he was just getting started. Word spread like wildfire. Police urged students to stay indoors. Parents pulled their kids from the university. Gun sales rocketed. The town was gripped by fear. Girls stopped sleeping alone. People pushed dressers against doors and booby-trapped windows. Gainesville became a ghost town overnight. And then, 2 more victims. On August 27th, Tracy Pauls and her roommate, Manny Taboda, were attacked in their apartment. Manny fought back fiercely, but it wasn't enough. Tracy was raped and murdered, and her body left in the same posed, theatrical fashion as the others. That brought the body count to 5, and still, no one had any idea who the killer was. The killer left almost nothing behind. No fingerprints, no DNA, no solid trace. Police zeroed in on a suspect, a troubled student named Edward Humphrey. He had a violent history and facial scars from a car accident that made him appear even more sinister in the eyes of the public. He was arrested on unrelated charges and held while investigators searched for evidence, but nothing linked him to the murders. Still, the public was relieved. They thought the nightmare was over. Months passed with no new murders. Then, a break, completely by chance. In November 1990, Danny Rolling was arrested in Ocala, Florida after a robbery. While in custody, he began talking to a fellow inmate, bragging and confessing. Rolling wasn't just a thief. He claimed he was the man behind the Gainesville murders. When police searched his campsite in the woods near the University of Florida, they found stolen items, jewelry, clothing, and something even more chilling. Audio recordings where Rollins described his fantasies and his crimes. He sang gospel songs in one breath, and then in the next, calmly described murdering women and posing their bodies. DNA testing would later confirm it. Danny Rolling was the Gainesville Ripper. Born in 1954 in Shreveport, Louisiana, Danny Rolling's life was marred by abuse and violence from the beginning. His father, a police officer, was cruel and often violent toward him and his mother. Rolling spent his early childhood drifting, committing burglaries, peeping into windows, and stalking women. In 1989, before Gainesville, he murdered an entire family in Shreveport: William Grissom, his daughter Julie, and his grandson Sean. Their bodies were mutilated and posed in the same ritualistic way as the Gainesville victims. Danny Rolling was a serial killer long before he made headlines. At his 1994 trial, Danny Rolling surprised everyone. He pled guilty to all 5 murders, no remorse and no emotion. He described how he chose his victims at random, stalking them like prey. He said he was driven by an alternate personality, Gemini, who took control during the killings. It was performative, calculated. He wanted the world to see him as a monster. Danny Rolling was sentenced to death and executed by lethal injection on October 25, 2006. His last words were a song. He sang a gospel hymn as the drugs entered his system. A few years after Rolling's arrest, a young screenwriter named Kevin Williamson saw a documentary about the Gainesville Ripper. The story horrified him, but it also fascinated him. It sparked an idea. What if a serial killer targeted high school students? What if he made phone calls before the murders? What if he wore a mask? That seed of an idea became the script for Scream, a film that would forever redefine the horror genre. While Scream is fictional, its DNA can be traced back to Rolling's crimes. The targeting of young people, the voyeurism, the ritualistic posing, the knife. The real horror behind Scream wasn't a man in a mask. It was Danny Rolling. And he didn't need a costume to be terrifying. Today, few students walking Gainesville campus know the full story of what happened there in the 90s. Some of the apartment buildings still stand, quiet and unassuming. But for the families of the victims, for the investigators who saw the scenes, for the students who lived through the terrifying fall, the memories remain. The Gainesville Ripper may be gone, but his legacy, his brutality, left a scar on Florida that will never fully heal. And the next time you watch Scream, remember, behind the mask, behind the phone calls, behind the blood, there was a real killer, and his name was Danny Rolling.